9 a.m. and I would like to call this meeting of the Benton County Board of Commissioners to order. First item of business
Recording in progress.
is introductions. I'm Zan Ojero, the board chair for the year.
Nancy Wise, Commissioner.
Pat Malone, Commissioner.
Vance Crony, County Council.
Rachel McEnany, County Administrator.
Corey Grogan, Public Information.
Amanda Makepeace, Benton County Staff.
Laura Kwiatkowski, Benton County Staff.
James Morales, Records and Elections Director.
Rick Krieger, Chief Financial Officer.
Interim Health Department Director.
We already saw the sheriff, so Sheriff Ben Arstle's online also. And I think that about covers us for the moment. I would like to acknowledge the fact that everyone is working from home. Most people are working from home today, and that the weather is really dicey. The roads are in very tough shape, icy. So thank you all for being so flexible. We will now move on to the regular agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda other than a conversation after our formal business about the weather? Hearing none, I'll consider the agenda approved. We'll move on to comments from the public. Are there any members of the public that would like to make public comment at this time? Hearing none, we will move on to our work session. I am getting a little bit of feedback, so I'm wondering whether someone does have their mic on. Yep, thank you. And the first item of business is our monthly public health update with April Holland.
Good morning, commissioners, Rachel, everyone here today. I did get some of the latest data up on some slides, and I'm not sure if staff here have that available. If not, I'd be happy to share my slides to give you, thank you so much, and the magic happens. Here to give you an update on what's going on out there in terms of COVID-19 and other respiratory illnesses. And I'm happy, of course, to engage in the discussion around weather conditions as they pertain to the health department when we get to that. So this first slide, as you know, is COVID hospitalizations over time. As of January 9th, there were 242 individuals hospitalized across the state. As you've likely gathered, across the U.S. and here in Benton County, we're in the midst of a COVID-19 surge. This one is driven by an Omicron subvariant called JN1. And it is estimated to account for approximately 60% of circulating variants in our area right now. So JN1 is somewhat distantly related to the XBB 1.5 variant, upon which the latest COVID booster was formulated. And this variant is causing a big rise in cases and rises in hospitalizations, but extensive population immunity, it attenuates or makes less impactful the virulence or severity of this and any of the dominating variants at this time and in this time space and time that we're in with a lot of population immunity. Higher levels of widespread vaccination would help this effect even more. So we continue to see a dominating variant that has more immune evasion, more people get sick, and therefore some are hospitalized and have severe disease. So our COVID testing positivity, thank you. Thanks for the next slide there. It all kind of mixes together for a couple of minutes here. The COVID testing positivity it's right around 11%. You can see here our wastewater monitoring data here, a lot more color than we have seen recently. Just one more note on hospitalizations. You know, these looking at the wastewater data, which is a helpful tool to help us see sort of where we are and what may be to come in the next couple of weeks. Seeing so much activity here leads us to suggest that hospitalizations will continue to be elevated for through the month of January, so another couple of weeks. You know, the data all aligns right now. As we all know, we're not counting individual cases, but we look to things like emergency visits, hospitalizations, wastewater data, and outbreak information to see where we are. And you can see at the bottom of this wastewater map that almost all of the sampling detected some signal of SARS-CoV-2 in the wastewater, with a good many experiencing increase or sustained increases. So hospitalization rates, if we're looking at CDC data, I'll move on to flu in just one sec, but hospitalization rates for COVID-19 right now are for Oregon are about 3.7 per 100,000 for all ages. It's not as high as we have seen them thanks to that population immunity, but we do need to continue to be mindful and protective of folks 65 and older. The hospitalization rate is much higher. So I said 3.7 per 100,000 for the general population, and it's 12.6 per 100,000 for folks ages 65 and up, according to the most recent data. So moving on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Wastewater data for flu. We are in flu season as well. You can see that, you know, about 70% of all of the wastewater sample sites detected some amount of influenza in the wastewater. About 40% are experiencing increase or sustained increase. And flu in the state, we are also expecting another couple of weeks of rising before we hit that plateau. The testing positivity rate is for the last data is actually identical to COVID-19. So about 11% of all tests are positive at this time. Next slide, please. So here's the wastewater data for RSV, respiratory syncytial virus. RSV is holding steady in the state, about half, as you see on this map, of the wastewater sites detected some measurable RSV signals. We are hoping to peak for the season and see a decrease really soon. RSV, as I've mentioned previously, is a big driver of hospitalizations in the very young and our elderly population. Hospitalization rates for RSV are low overall for the whole population, just at 2.4 per 100,000 people. But when we look at 0 to 4-year-olds, it's 23 per 100,000 among that group, and 4.4 for age 65 and older. So I'm hoping to see that decrease soon. Next slide, please. This next slide looks at weekly emergency department visits by the illness type. The black line is the three main players combined, and then you can see it broken out and relative to where we were, say in November to the end of the year and into January. You can see that we're experiencing the season right now, and just under 6% of ED visits at the most recent data collection were for these respiratory illnesses. Next slide, please. So you've seen this slide before. Just want to remind all of us in our communities that the updated fall 2023 COVID vaccine is protective. It does provide protection from severe illness. You see the recommendations in front of you. And for the last few meetings, I've been bringing you vaccine administration numbers. I don't have those most recent numbers for you today, but according to Oregon Health Authority data, Benton County, along with Hood River, both have the highest vaccination rates among counties for the state, with 18% of all populations up to date with the fall 2023 vaccine. Again, more uptake would be better for us in the long run. So we really encourage folks to ask questions, learn more if they haven't received this vaccine, to get to a place where they're ready to get it. We're here to answer your questions, and the vaccine is available both in health services and across our community. Next slide, please. Just a quick update. We've talked about RSV vaccination previously. There have been some supply issues with nirsevimab, which is the RSV vaccine for little babies. And so just wanted to share that additional doses of this vaccine have been put into circulation. And so all administration is back to standard ways of administering this vaccine. So it's available, and providers are recommending it to the populations listed here. I think there's just a couple more slides here. Next, we all know about our annual flu vaccine. It's not too late to get a flu vaccine if you haven't received one yet. They are also widely available, often for low or no cost. And flu is out there, and it's not been fun for folks. It does have an impact on our systems. So again, it's the best day if you haven't had a flu vaccine this season. The best day to get one is, well, maybe not today with the roads, but hopefully in the next couple of days here. Next and final slide. Here we are in January. Let's have a healthy start to the new year. Ensure we're up to date with those vaccines, staying home when we're sick, and especially when it comes to COVID-19, but also other illnesses. Utilizing those resources that are available to us is important. Home tests are still effective, and those home antigen tests work for COVID-19. If someone does test positive, it's a good idea to check in with your provider to see if the available therapeutics are right for you. They have made a difference for a lot of folks. So the only other little piece of news on the public health front in terms of illness is I just wanted to alert you to the fact that there are some measles cases in Southwest Washington right now. Our friends in Clark County and around are not strangers to this kind of outbreak, unfortunately, but currently the case count is at 6, and it may or may not increase, but our CD team is at the ready to assist and learn of any possible exposures in our area. So that's all I have on the public health front. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
April, given the snow and ice and the fact that we have been doing emergency sheltering, do you have a brief update for the board about how the emergency cold weather sheltering is going? You were muted, April.
Muted.
Thank you so much for alerting me to that. I didn't want to go out of turn or spoil anyone else's news here. So yeah, I do. I'd be happy to share this with you. As you all know, commissioners, the health department holds a contract for overflow severe weather sheltering with a contractor, Faith, Hope, and Charity. They did activate their operations on Friday and will work through tonight for the hopefully final night of activation for this event. They use a mix of hotel and congregate sheltering in severe weather for people who, for whatever reason, can't access other sheltering. All in all, night to night, the number of people served varied some, but more than 20 hotel rooms were used, and the congregate site, First Christian Church, was at full capacity each night except Friday night when it was closed. Due to the unanticipated closure of many of our daytime warming sites, our partners, our community partners, and some of our staff stepped up to volunteer to ensure that daytime warming could be accommodated. I want to just give a special thanks to Allison Hopgood and the folks at Corvallis Daytime Drop-In Center who helped ensure that daytime warming could be staffed on site at First Christian Church. I want to thank Unity Shelter for being able to increase their operating hours so that guests could stay in place and stay warm. And want to thank our staff from our health department, harm reduction and healthy communities team who stepped up to volunteer as well. I also just want to express thanks for emergency management. Brian and I were in frequent contact throughout the days and nights to ensure that important updates were passed along. I really appreciate how communicative and accessible our interchanges are. And I know he must have been getting messages left and right from so many folks. So it's wonderful to have such a good working relationship with emergency management. I know there are probably more questions that you have, but I just that's the overview.
Thank you. I'm very grateful. Are there questions? Okay.
Yeah, April, you mentioned vaccination rate, and Benton County is once again at the top of the list of counties for rates. 18% seems like, well, we're number one, but overall we're not doing that well. And I assume the vaccine's available, and the problem is just people thinking COVID is in the rearview mirror. I guess, do you have any thoughts on how we could get people's attention?
Sure, thank you. You know, I there's a lot of fatigue out there around the COVID-19 pandemic and the continuation of COVID-19 being such a disruptor. And all of our communications, you know, we make the impacts of COVID as clear as we possibly can. At 18%, you know, that we'd really like to see a much higher vaccination rate than that. I don't know. I mean, the overall rate across the country is so much lower. So I'm really grateful for our community and their willingness to be vaccinated. I think another piece of COVID-19 that where vaccination makes a really strong case is around long COVID, which is still not very well understood. There have been numerous studies that have shown that people who are up to date with vaccination have lower rates of long COVID as well as lower rates of severe illness. So we continue to try to increase confidence in vaccines and the importance of getting those boosters, and seeking best practices and best resources, and honestly we are doing well in terms of having the tools and sharing the tools, and we'll continue to ensure that we're doing where the health department, where I believe that we do a really good job is we focus in on our communities at highest need and highest risk. And so our immunizations program and our home visiting nurses and others are not just giving the vaccines, they're actively conducting outreach to long-term care facilities and to skilled nursing facilities, and not just sharing the information, but bringing the opportunities and the access to them through connecting pharmacies with the long-term care facilities, getting more opportunities in case people, weren't interested or able the first time around. So we are continuing to conduct outreach and to just share the general information. We still have vaccine marketing and advertising that we continue to do, and we're refreshing those regularly. And yeah, we'll continue to do that and follow best practices as we learn of more.
How does the COVID vaccination rate compare to the flu vaccination rate?
That's a good question. We look at the COVID vaccination rate in different ways, right? We can measure the initial primary series of vaccination, which is much higher than the 18%. Of course, it's closer to 80%. The flu vaccination rate. This data, I usually get the numbers directly from the immunization site, and wasn't able to get into it this morning. So as of about a month ago, we're second in the state for overall population at about 27.5%. And over 50% for ages 65 and over for influenza. And if we were to look at the data again for COVID-19, overall sort of primary vaccination is much higher. And then we had the boosters, varying numbers of boosters based on different factors. And then this most recent booster with the monovalent sort of targeted strain is just not getting the traction that our initial vaccines do. And yeah, I mean, there is widespread illness. A lot of people are getting COVID-19, and it can be confusing to know when you should get your vaccine if you've had an infection. We have all of those guidelines in place. I do think that we're in a place of exhaustion and overwhelm, but we will continue to practice vaccine confidence and continued vaccine administration, uptake to the best of our ability.
Thank you for that information and for you and your team's effort to keep people safe during this cold weather.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you. Any other questions for my fellow commissioners or county administrator? Thank you much. Okay, moving on to agenda item 4.2, recognition of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. Yesterday, as you all know, was a holiday celebrating the contributions of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King to our nation. But unfortunately, the icy weather interfered with many of our usual ways of celebrating Martin Luther King. The annual Peace March hosted by Oregon State University and ongoing community volunteerism on Martin Luther King Day, much of which takes place outdoors. The life's work of Reverend King and his colleagues has been greatly on my mind over the last few weeks as our election season revs up into full gear. His focus on equal rights before the law and in practice is as important as ever, given that the U.S. lacks a constitutional clause guaranteeing every citizen over 18 the right to vote in presidential and congressional elections, as some other countries have. Our laws are a real patchwork interpreted by the courts, so we must continue to be vigilant to protect voting rights for everyone. King's emphasis on economic rights also reverberates today. A lot of our partisan wrangling has roots in economic inequality alongside cultural differences, but reshoring manufacturing to the U.S. and increasing union power helps. On the other hand, distribution of wealth and income in our country remains extremely high. It's the highest of any of the G7 nations, for instance. Our COVID-era programs for universal basic income and expanded child tax credits demonstrated that we have the tools to change this equation. So we still have a lot of work to do to achieve the vision that Martin Luther King laid out in the 1960s before he was so unfortunately assassinated. We have a lot of work to do to foster the creation of beloved community, as he would say. Oregon State University is hosting multiple commemorative events, including lectures and other conversations, and you can find information for that at their Office of Institutional Diversity. And I would encourage people to check them out. There are some interesting folks coming to speak, and those presentations will be both virtual and in person. So there's opportunity for many people to share in the further commemorations of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's life and mission. So thank you. Next up is James Morales with the discussion of proposed revisions to Benton County Code, chapters 4, 5, and 6, having to do with elections. James, welcome.
Good morning, commissioners.
You might want to speak up a little bit where it's a little hard to hear you.
Oh, okay. Good morning, commissioners. Hope that's loud enough. I must have my mic turned down. I need to figure out how to get that turned back up. Let's see if I can do that. I'll just speak loudly. Okay, so before you today, we have chapters 4, 5, and 6 to the Benton County Code, which guide the filing of candidates for county offices, as well as that's chapter 4, and chapter 5 is going to be our measures, and chapter 6 is going to be voters pamphlet related guidance. So primarily what we sought to do here is to make a lot of clarifications within the code, because whenever we'd refer to it, sometimes we'd find ourselves confused as to which elections the codes were referring to, starting off with referring to special elections when in fact the code was referring to much more than just special elections. So we made some clarifications in the election section, starting out in chapter 4, to which the section is affecting. We removed any reference to precinct committee persons, because those are not county offices, and that was not what the code was intended to address. There are much of these election processes are addressed through the Oregon Revised Statute, and there's plenty of guidance there. But when we have things like ranked choice voting, which is specific to Benton County, we want to address that. And we also want to address the election of county offices and the nominating process is affected by that. So that's what we did. And in fact, Commissioner Weiss also provided additional feedback in the email that I just was able to go over this morning. And those are all, I thought, really good suggestions to add additional clarity to those sections of statute or to this Benton County Code that we are revising. So thank you for that, Commissioner Weiss. Let's see. Oh, another part of what we were cleaning up was the filing date. We had brought forward some changes previously, and we missed a date, which they should have gone to the 70th day and our 71st day, and it went to, and we had it at the 60th. So we caught that error and we're correcting that. That actually affects the commissioner's filings. And it lines it up with the ORS as well. We've done that. Then in chapter 5, we were just making it clear that explanatory statements they're actually a voter's pamphlet filing, and there's not going to be a judicial review, but Benton County has a process for explanatory review that is done by the county clerk, where I can only recall doing that once, and Vance was a key part of that process in helping us get through that particular review. I think it was back when the Riverfront Park was done way back. Let's see. And we also added some clarity that if ranked choice voting is not utilized in the election for county commissioners or county positions, that plurality, the candidate receiving the most votes is also elected. It's not just going to be the ranked choice process. And I wanted to just mainly ask if you had any questions about the changes, or if you saw any that were of concern or that I can address in particular.
So I have a question. So separate from the email that I sent with my suggested edits, on page 22 of the packet, which is chapter 5, page 4 of that, let's see, section 5.375, cost and election date for advisory measures. It states or mentions that advisory measures will be limited to elections, which are not even year primary and general elections. Is that new, or has that been our current practice?
So that was something, so as you know, advisory measures are specific only to Benton County. No one else in the state has any guidance, or there's not anything in statute regarding advisory measures. Plus, we adopted ranked choice voting advisory measures as an option, which is also unique to Benton County. My concern became that if we did get one on the primary general ballot, was ballot space, and being able to fit a ranked choice voting measure, advisory measure on that space, because we're giving options, and we're talking about quite a bit of ballot space needed to convey that to the electorate. So the idea that I had to save some space there was to limit the election, or to make sure that there's plenty of space on the ballot, I should say, was to limit the elections in which it can be submitted to the electors to any election other than the primary or general election for an advisory measure.
Thank you. So I guess to play devil's advocate, what happens if there's too much stuff for a ballot? Do we go to a second page? Can you make the ballots longer? I mean, I just don't know how that works.
Yes, we can make our ballot longer. Up to 17 inches is the limitation of our particular system. And after that, that is when you do go to a second page. there's particular challenges that occur when a ballot has more than one page, when you're trying to audit your election and make sure that everything balances. So my goal is to try and avoid pushing a second page ballot if at all possible. And because I've had to do it once before in the general election of 2000, and it was just a real challenge to try and show that this is how many ballots got returned from this many electors, and this was the turnout versus this is the number of votes that were cast when you have voters that return, say, only page 2 of the ballot or only page 1 of the ballot. It makes it a real complicated process. We may be better equipped now to figure it all out than we were then, but it came as a little bit of shock, I think, in that first go around.
Thank you. So I guess my question for the other commissioners is, I mean, so all that makes complete sense. So I just want to get your 2 thoughts on, I mean, technically this would be limiting what can be put on a ballot. It's technically limiting an election. For good reason, it sounds like, but I just want to make sure that we are okay doing that or not.
Commissioner Malone?
Yeah, I'm fine with the change. James, have we used the advisory option to this date?
To date, we have not used the ranked choice voting advisory measure option. There have been advisory measures that are just yes or no, but not the ranked choice voting. Another limitation that's on the ranked choice voting advisory measure is that it be a district fully contained within the boundaries of Benton County, since our neighbor counties would not be able to process ranked choice ballots.
Okay, I'm fine with the change here, and if it becomes a real problem instead of a theoretical problem, we can address that at a later date. But I think just for practicality, this change, I'm fine with the change.
From my perspective, I fully understand the audit issues and the complications that it introduces when you have a multi-page ballot. If and when the state shifts some of the state offices to ranked choice voting, we probably will have multi-page ballots. And at that point, I would think that we might reconsider this clause. And the technology hopefully will be better as well. So I'm fine with this for now, but I think that it would be a good idea to flag it to see if there's demand in future, and also to be in accord with the latest capacity in terms of our technology for auditing ballots.
And I would request also that we reach out to our partners at the cities and let them know about this change, just so that there's no surprises for them down the road.
Sure, I can do that.
My other question is, given that the Nancy's comments, Commissioner Wise's comments came in the form of an electronic mail message, and they have not been seen or published, do we want to proceed with a first reading today and the public hearing? Or should, how do we do that? Do we hold the public hearing and then continue it so that everyone can see those changes in black and white before we conduct a first reading? I guess that's partly a question for my fellow commissioners, but also for Vance as our county counsel.
So I guess the first thing I want to add is that Commissioner Wise's email this morning, Erica, that should be placed in the record of the public meeting. It is entirely, obviously, up to the 3 commissioners. I would posit that Commissioner Wise's edits are not much different than what we typically see during the public hearing that might be made verbally. So looking at what she submitted this morning doesn't seem to change the tenor much of what was proposed. I think James's initial edits to chapters 4, 5, and 6 are a bit meatier. No offense, Commissioner Wise, than Commissioner Wise's edits, and those have been published and those have been available to the public. So with that information, you know, the three of you can decide what to do with the hearing. I would, one other point, there is a time frame within which elections, and James is hoping to have this completed so that it is effective for the next election cycle.
Thank you for that, and for the reminder of the timeliness of the changes. Might I suggest that we have staff take the content of Commissioner Wise's edits and put them into just a slide or two so that they can actually be shared on screen during the public hearing component of our meeting, just for full transparency. I recognize that they're not, they don't change substance, that they're more about form and clarity, but I'm just interested in transparency.
And I would agree with that, Commissioner Ojero. I'm fine putting off the public hearing if we have time. James, do you know off the top of your head what that timeline is, or if postponing would still work for that?
Yes, I believe we'd still be fine if we go to next week for the public hearing, because the first reading, because the second reading would be February 6th, if I understand. Is that correct, Vance? And that timeline would still work if we brought the full text of your changes as well as what I've brought forth forward at next week's public hearing. Is that correct, Vance?
Yes, and if this is the direction the board wishes to go, I would recommend that we do open the public hearing today and then immediately continue it to next week, because we've already published the notices for today's hearing.
It sounds like a plan. Okay. Well, thank you, James.
I do have one last question. So in those, I think there were 5 different headings of changes that I submitted that they weren't meant to be substantial, as Vance said, but just for clarity and grammar and all that. Were there any of those changes that either commissioner didn't like? I mean, okay, great.
Looks like you have support from all of us.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on this topic?
Just thank you to James and his crew to clean up kind of our code / bylaws so that what we do and what we say we're going to do line up, and getting things coordinated with ORS, and just I assume this hasn't been changed in a while, and it's every once in a while I have to do a little housekeeping. So I appreciate the effort in getting rid of some clunky / inaccurate language.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to the next item of business. That is item 5.1, approval of the November 28, 2023 Tuesday board meeting minutes on the consent calendar. And I will note that although those minutes still say draft, that is not the case. They are the final minutes as presented by our recorder. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar, or are there any changes to those minutes?
I would move to approve it with 2 changes. On page 36, at the top of the page, let's see, sorry, it's hard with one. Page 36. So the second sentence, it says, Wise wanted to ask RS, as in Republic Services, if there's evidence that the high volume discount is effective or if it causes more people to throw recycling into the garbage. And I think that's actually backwards. I think what I was saying was I wanted to ask Republic Services if there was any evidence that doing away with the high volume discount is effective or if it causes people to throw garbage into the recycling. And if that sounds familiar to both commissioners, then I would ask that that's one change that we make. And then the other change was there's about halfway down the page. It said Wise directed Nichols to inform RS that she could not approve the increase without speaking to a representative. I mean, one commissioner, I don't technically direct staff. So I would just request that we change that to request, like Wise, let's see. I actually took time to write this down and now I can't find it. Wise stated that she could not increase, or Wise stated that she could not approve the increase without speaking to her public services first.
So Wise informed Nichols that she could not approve the increase without first speaking to a representative of her public services.
Perfect.
Or hearing from a representative of public services, because we were asking them to come back to the board. Erica, did you capture that?
Yes, I did. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So, Commissioner Malone, any edits or changes, or are you okay with those changes to the minutes?
I'm fine with the changes, and I don't have anything else to add.
Is that a second?
So I will second the consent calendar with the changes that Commissioner Wise just made.
Thank you. All in favor, please indicate with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. We will now move into, first of all, does anyone need a break before we move on? Okay, then we will move into new business. As long as we have the appropriate staff with us. Our next item of business is item 7.1, and I do not see our Natural Areas Parks and Events Director with us online yet. So with your permission, I'd like to move to item 7.2 while we make sure that Tommy's able to join us, and ask Gary Stockhoff to please present item 7.2.
Good morning, commissioners. Item 7.2 concerns the naming of the new collector street that we're building as part of the courthouse DA EOC project. We are being asked to follow a procedure by the city, and part of that is to submit 3 prioritized names to them. I want to thank Corey and Genevieve and the staff over there who pulled all the information together and did the polling and monitored it. It made this old engineer's brain handle this a lot easier, so I appreciate their help in doing that. As you can see from the information, after the poll, the top 3 names were Champinafu, and then followed closely by Carson Drive and Moore Drive. Now, just so you know, Drive is the nomenclature that we are being asked, I think, follow based on the direction of this road and where it takes off of Highway 20. Eventually, this road will kind of angle back to the north and east, and I believe tie into that ring road around HP, and then eventually come out there at Circle where the light is at. So it's part of Corvallis's transportation system plan. So what we're asking today is to confirm how you want to rank the names, and then we will submit the application to the city for their review and approval. And it's reviewed by the fire marshal. I think our surveyor looks at it just to make sure it's not duplicative or confusing or something like that. But I believe the 3 names that we have fit into those requirements, and any of them could be considered to be the name for the new road. And with that, I will take questions or guidance.
Okay, I look to my fellow commissioners for your feedback on the 3 top polling names. Chapinafu, honoring the Kalapuya band's ancestral homelands here. Carson, for Letitia Carson, and more I don't recall.
I could give a little description of that one if you'd like.
It's
Thank you.
Harriet Moore, yeah.
Harriet Moore, thank you. Corey, that would be great.
So Harriet Moore served in the U.S. Army Medical Corps, pursued education and contributed to Oregon State College Library and Archives. And she was just really committed to historical accuracy and dedicated to helping students.
Thank you. Commissioners, preferences?
I guess I have a question. So the poll that went out, that was for Benton County community members.
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay.
Corey or Jim, Corey can probably clarify that.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
The polling that was done, was that for Benton County community members?
It was, yeah. We posted that on a variety of channels, including Nextdoor and our social media channels, and shared it with local media. And so that was our community members, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there was just very little information in the packet for me to dig into and try to figure this all out. So I guess my one of them, I'm probably gonna butcher the pronunciation, Chapanafu. Is that
Chapinafu. The M
Chapanafu?
is silent as I understand it.
Okay, because we already have a park in Corvallis that has a similar name but different spelling. So I just wonder if that would be confusing for people. But that's not necessarily a deal breaker for me. Just wanted to put that out there. I'm open to hear the other commissioners' thoughts as well.
Yeah, I've got a question, Gary. You mentioned to start, any of these names will be drive, and that could change when it becomes a through street. But the name that we the first name would remain the same. It would just turn to Pinafu Street or whatever the Corvallis convention is.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now it looks like to be drive. And it would be whatever the preferred name is, drive from Highway 20 up to Circle Drive, up to Circle Boulevard. That's my understanding of how Corvallis would work it. Originally, Corvallis asked us to make it Walnut, which is the road that's on the other side of Circle where the signal is at. And then they came back and said, no, we don't want Walnut. So you guys come up with a name. So that's where we're at now. I will say, commissioners, according to our votes, it was a very close vote tally between the top 2, Champinafu and Carson. I think there's only 4 vote difference.
Okay, I don't have a terribly strong preference. I like the acknowledgement of the Kalapuya band. My only concern is that given pronunciation questions and the ambiguity, if we had emergencies along that drive and there on the Community Safety and Justice campus, it might be a little more challenging initially. But I think that could be overcome. All of these names have great emotional resonance for elements of our community and want to acknowledge that. So I would be happy with either Chepinafu or Carson Drive.
And Commissioner Ogier, I think the point you make about pronunciation is valid. Although, like you said, as time goes on, I think people, so I'm reminded of a former governor of California, a Terminator. What was his name?
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Okay. So if people can learn and pronounce Schwarzenegger, I think they can figure this out.
Point well taken. And that to me sounds like an endorsement of Chepinafu.
It's fine with me. So let's see. I am happy to make a motion. I move to approve submitting Chepinafu Drive, Carson Drive, and Moore Drive as the preferred street names for the new Collector Street for the courthouse / district attorney's office facility.
Second.
All in favor, please indicate with an eye.
Aye.
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 Thank you,
very much.
commissioners. I will keep you posted on how we do with our city process.
Okay, kind of fun.
Gary, any other news to report on the courthouse project?
We're moving forward. Great things are happening. I was not on the courthouse itself, but on the EOC. We sent out schematic drawings or the start of that on Friday. So we are moving ahead very quickly on the EOC, and the sheriff and his staff have been awesome to work with. And we see it coming down the schedule as we hope it would be, that they can just pick it up and carry on with it as they are underway with the courthouse and the DA. So
would the EOC construction be simultaneous or?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the hope. Yeah.
Well, and another of our projects I noticed, I think last Wednesday, they were actually moving, what do you call it? Muck on the crisis center site.
As the crisis center, they're taking out the bad, and they will replace it with the good, and then they will then be able to start working on the foundation and start building it. So yes, it started last week of removing the contaminated soil.
And as far as you know, this will be a continuous process now that they're started. They'll keep moving forward.
That again, yes, that is the hope. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll circle back to item 7.1. Director Douglas is not able to be with us today. She's having connectivity issues, evidently. And her deputy Jesse Ott is also not with us at this time. But item 7.1 is a fairly straightforward agenda item. And with your permission, I would like to move ahead and approve it if we can. It's just a grant application approval. Rachel, do you know enough to speak to this?
Really broad base for EPA that we're looking at and working with some partners locally to look at this. It's very early on the stage, so we are looking forward to it. But unfortunately, I don't have any of the documentations in front of me, but I have been briefed by Tommy to move forward. And of course, I think Rick Krager was also part of a little of those conversations, not to put Rick on the spot. But it never hurts us to look for federal funding. This will take time, probably about 1.5 years. But anytime we have opportunities to go for federal funding and we can match it, we try to look at it to broaden the scope and mission of NAEP.
Okay, this particular agenda item is for an Oregon Parks and Recreation local government grant. So yeah, it is a local one. And my understanding was that we looked at it previously, and this is a second round of proposals, and they've upped the limit of what we can apply for. So the application would be to improving the restroom facilities at McBee. And I think that is something that's a high priority for all of us, so that we can make sure that that campground is back and available for all of those that have become accustomed to using it. So are there, I don't know whether my fellow commissioners have questions. I know that this has come up with us in our discussions with both Tommy Douglas and Jesse Ott at previous work sessions.
Yeah, I'm generally familiar with this grant, and I appreciate the suggestion to move forward. I don't see any downside to approving this.
Would you be willing to make a motion?
I would love to. I move to approve the Natural Areas, Parks, and Events Department to request to apply for the 2024 Oregon Parks and Recreation Local Government Grant.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate with an eye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Well, with that, we have come to the end of our regular business. We do have some other discussion topics. We wanted to ask the sheriff a little bit more about the storm forecast for today and likelihood of events tomorrow, and how to best stay in touch and on top of what's going on. So Sheriff, if you're available.
I am. Can you hear me all right? Brian Lee just sent out an updated email. They had a sit rep meeting this morning situation. Anyway, it looks like this afternoon we're expecting between the hours of 1300 and 1500, at least possibly up to a quarter of an inch of additional freezing rain into this evening, with a possible accumulation up to about half an inch. I'll be in contact again this evening with Tracy Martineau and Rachel, and we will, of course, make an educated decision. I'll talk to the on-duty supervisors for both Benton County and Corvallis Police Department, as well as reaching out to Public Works and coordinating with Brian. Earlier, April had mentioned her coordination with Brian. Brian's been off the charts the last few days. He's been great. He's been coordinating a lot of different angles, both with the state and locally. He sent out a handful of messages, both over the text and email. He's been on it, and I just can't sing his praises enough. The sheriff on the east side of the state reached out and wanted to make sure we were okay over here, because we just don't get these kind of storms on the east side. We get a lot of snow, but nothing like this. This is wild. So I would encourage everybody, if they don't have to stay home. Don't venture out. It's not worth it. The emergency room, as you saw, the emergency room's tied up with falls and injuries related to that. And so just try and stay inside, and just let the warm weather hit us this evening into tomorrow. The jail made a late run yesterday to Norcor and brought back several people, because the gorge is supposed to stay kind of nasty throughout the week and cold, and we aren't certain we're going to get back up there. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you might have for me, or if April's still here, or Gary.
Commissioner Malone.
Yeah, my specific concern is we have a scheduled meeting at 8:30 tomorrow morning, and just personally, I've got some challenging roads. Highway 223 is there's a reason it has 3 numbers, and it's a secondary state highway, which means it's towards the middle or bottom of the list as far as the state working on it to clean it up. But
well, we could certainly hold that meeting remotely, as we have this one.
I would encourage that if it's a possibility. And talking with Rich at Public Works, he's only got so many resources, and they've been busy clearing roads and trees and whatnot. So as far as getting Sanders out, it's been pretty hit and miss for him because his staff stretched pretty thin as well.
Yeah, Highway 99 only got gravel this morning, so yeah.
I think my preference would be to just go ahead and say that we're going to do it virtual. Just it's always better to be safe than sorry, and it's pretty convenient and easy for us to go virtual. So
Agreed.
Sheriff, I just have a question. It's Rachel. Electrical outages are better now. I wasn't clear on Brian's report.
The last I'd heard, we were up to about 1,200 throughout the county, and that was a day ago. So I have to believe they've done some work on addressing that issue. I know that South Corvallis and some of the residents there had lost power for a little bit. It included downtown Corvallis, the jail and the sheriff's office, LEC, lost power. Our backup generators were being utilized then. It's one of those deals. Brian didn't update it, so I have to believe it's no longer an issue. Had it been an issue, I know Brian would have certainly addressed it in his most recent email.
Great.
We lost power Saturday, just about dark, and then I think the power came back on about 2:00 Sunday morning. But the other thing with the freezing rain, may have some more tree limbs falling, and so late tonight, well, I guess even this afternoon, evening, there may be some more electrical outages.
And I would add, for Rachel's purposes as well, not having been here previously for this event, once all this melts, we'll start seeing some flooding. And so I've already started that conversation with Under Sheriff Rogers as it relates to, the next portion of this event. And I don't want to overwhelm Brian, so I'll hit him up probably tomorrow, and we'll start discussing what if anything the forecast looks for the Marys River, the Willamette, and all the surrounding, just to make sure we're prepped for that.
Thank you. Yeah, the Willamette was already up in the parking lot at boat ramp down here in South Corvallis. So it's going to be interesting.
And I would add too, commissioners, Brian did a good job of communicating with NAPE and Jesse Ott, and had this event gone on and we needed additional space. I know that the NAPE was ready and willing to accommodate that as well. So I just want to make sure that they get a little bit extra there. I know April worked her tail off and her folks. And so it's great communication and good stuff. We'll have an after action review next week with Brian just to see what we can do better next time, because there's always going to be a next time, and that's how you get better. So.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Gary or for Jeff at this time?
no questions. I just want to verify that we are agreed on an all virtual meeting for tomorrow morning. Okay.
Yes, we're all agreed, and obviously power outages are the big caveat. Hopefully we and staff will have access. So I would recommend that any updates to our meeting process tomorrow, or if there needs to be a cancellation, that it come to us all by text, and make sure your cell phones are charged so that you can receive said text tomorrow morning. Thank you very much. Okay, at this time.
And I'm sorry, this is Amanda speaking. I have the keys for changing the website. So if anybody has any updates, please make sure that they get to me so that I can get them onto the website. So myself, Johnavie, and Corey have access at this point. Other folks are still in training. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.
And I just wanted to thank the sheriff and his crew, and April and Brian Lee for helping get us through this Rachel, this is unusual to, usually our snow is wet and sloppy, kind of 50-cent piece size flakes that can knock you over a little bit. So to just have ice, and it's hard to walk. I mean, so anyway, thank everybody who's involved in helping get us through this kind of challenging weather.
Well, I'd like to just add, as someone who came from an emergency management background a little bit in the state of New York, you have a really strong team here, commissioners. They're very communicative. You have a strong emergency manager, a strong sheriff. The communication over the weekend was fluid. There was absolutely a level of competence and leadership within your county government and your partners that I witnessed, having only been here a short 3 months, that you should be the people of Benton County should feel like they're in very good hands.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was very impressed to see all of the emails back and forth, everyone coordinating, all the plans coming together. It makes me feel really good about being a commissioner in this county.
Well, and along those lines, if you're still with us, Corey, maybe get out some information now after the event and kind of capture some of the comments that we've just made to let people know what the county was up to during this event, and thank people that put in a lot of time over what was supposed to be a long, quiet weekend.
Absolutely. We can work on that.
Great, thanks.
It's going to be very exciting when we get a new EOC, Emergency Operations Center, which is even going to, want to remind you that our small emergency management staff and sheriff's office are in very small quarters. And even with that, how effectively they're able to execute.
Thank you all. Okay. Is there any other business?
We come back at 11 for the public hearing.
At this point, we will stand in recess until 11 a.m. For the public hearing regarding the first reading of ordinance 2024-0322, proposing revisions to Benton County Code chapters 4, 5, and 6. See you all at 11.
We must be doing something right. Vance looks happy, smiling, nodding his head. So
thank you.
See you soon.
Recording stopped.
Good morning once again.
Recording in progress.
We will reconvene our board meeting for January 16th at this time with our public hearing. First reading of ordinance 2024-0322, proposing revisions to Benton County Code for chapters 4, 5, and 6 with James Morales.
Sorry about that. Is my mic working better this time?
It is, thank you.
Oh, good. Yes, so we went over this earlier, but I believe we were going to add to the record the email from Commissioner Wise. We can do that. Should I go over what was sent?
If you would just briefly go over the intent of this public hearing, because we do have members of the community on the call, and I'm not sure they were here with us this morning.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And then we can invite, then we can take a look at those edits suggested by Commissioner Wise. And we can either invite members of the public to testify at this time, or we can just continue the hearing till our next scheduled date.
Okay, so the changes to chapter 4 to clarify the elections that are impacted by the Benton County Code, which would be the primary, general, and any special elections called by the county commission. Removing some of the confusing titles, as well as the unrelated precinct committee person section, which is not a county office. Correcting an erroneous filing date that affected the commissioners, which was listed as 61st day, and it should have been the 70th to align it with the statute and the election process itself. And being clear that whether we use ranked choice voting or the traditional plurality voting, that the elected who the elected candidate will be in each case. Chapter 5, we clarified that explanatory statements are not there's not a judicial review subject to that. That's an actual voter's pamphlet filing with a separate review process. Let's see, then in chapter 6, we added language to clarify the advisory measure ballot title and explanatory process, which also has a review process within that. Let's see. Well, actually, that was still in chapter 5. Sorry about that. So that's in chapter 5. And chapter 6, we added some flexibility to the manners in which the voter's pamphlet can be distributed, allowing for electronic or budgetary constraints, not making it a requirement. Voters pamphlets are not required in statute typically, but Benton County, of course, our philosophy is that if we can do it, we will do it. And so that's how we want our voters to be educated. So that is the intent. We just want to make sure that if we're in a situation where it makes more sense to distribute our pamphlets differently or in some other fashion, that we have the flexibility in our code to allow us to do that. And let's see, well, we also clarified some of the space requirements, just leaving it to word counts rather than square inches for voters pamphlet space, photo requirements. So that was antiquated, and we're just allowing for a electronic submission of those photos as well. And so that's what was submitted to you. We did also add language and gender requirements and other ability to change the language or add another language if needed to the materials that we provide. So that is in there as well. And Commissioner Weiss had provided additional clarification and grammar improvement language to be considered as well. And I think that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for James at this time? Okay, hearing none. I would like to invite public testimony. Is there anyone here that would like to testify on this ordinance? Mark Yeager.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Not having any background on the information that has been presented to the commissioners, I wonder if it might be helpful to explain to those that might review this as a recording later, since there doesn't seem to be any other public members on the call. What process was used to develop these changes? Were there any outside either advisory committee or state elections personnel? Is this just simply something that the county is doing on its own without any participation or input from either members of the public or other election officials? So if there could be some background presented as part of this process, I think that would be helpful in understanding what's driving the change now and what's driving these specific changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Yeager. What is driving what got me to identify the need was when I saw that the filing date for the commissioner had been missed, actually, the last time we had done an update to the county code. And when I saw that, I thought, oh, we need to get that date corrected. And in doing so, it just so happened that we were working on the county website and we were learning more about shortening up our language a bit, trying to be a little clearer. And we had in the past at times struggled to, I guess, understand some of our own county code. And so just myself, elections manager Darla Rush, and County Council Vance Croney went through these chapters guiding our election processes in some areas to see if there was anywhere that we could add some clarity to the existing processes. I think the one place that is not just adding clarity to what's already being guided elsewhere, meaning in Oregon Revised Statute, was in our advisory measure section, which is strictly a Benton County code process. There is no Oregon Revised Statute guiding advisory measures. So in that one, we discussed this earlier, but you may not have been present. I had sought the change where we're clear that any city or district that requested an advisory measure bear the cost for doing so, and that the elections that an advisory measure could be submitted be limited to elections other than the primary and general election. And the reason for that was trying to make sure that we did not push to a two-page ballot, and that process and the reasons for that, or the difficulty in auditing the election process when you get pushed to a two-page ballot, and the way we have designed the ranked choice voting advisory measure process, it takes up a lot of space because you're doing a measure with up to 5 options. What for voters to consider, that really takes up a lot of ballot space, and I just feared that that would push us to multi-page ballots and be confusing for the voters, as well as difficult to audit that process in the end to determine the number of votes cast, number of voters participating, and ballots returned.
James, could you give us a hypothetical example of what an advisory measure would be?
When we, yes, sure, Commissioner I mean, Wise. When we first presented this idea, when I presented it, the example given was the actual jail measure to potentially utilize that for the advisory ranked choice voting process, where maybe several options might be presented to the electorate, or just to gauge where the commissioners might gauge what an interest in, say, the size of the jail, the cost of the jail, those sorts of things, the services included in the measure might be. So that was kind of the example that was presented at that time.
So if I could, so is my understanding correct that if, let's say, Benton County or the city of Corvallis, city of Philomath, city of Monroe, city of Adair Village wanted to put out a question for their voters and say, you know, would you rather have option A, B, or C? And then people could vote on the option that they want or rank their options. Then we would get that information back, and it wouldn't be setting any measures or anything, you know, official. It would just be giving us information that we could use. Is that correct?
Correct. It's non-binding.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. Is there anyone else that would like to testify at this time? Are there any other questions for James? I'd like to just comment that when it comes to county code, this process of publishing the draft language, holding a public hearing, and having people participate as you have, Mark, in this process is part of that whole public process. And given that the edits that Commissioner Wise proposed to this language, we are planning to continue this public hearing so that we can indeed have more people be aware of the language and what we're doing, and not have multiple versions of the county code language in place as we change it. So yes, it was only county staff that participated in this particular change. We are a home rule county with our own charter, and our code is, unless there's something that is prescribed by the state, it is up to us and our voters to approve of anything. So this public hearing is the opportunity to provide input. James, you don't have any specific advisory councils or bodies to the elections office, correct?
That's correct. I thought I did identify that it was myself, elections manager Darla Rush, and county council Vance Croney. We were the ones that reviewed it. We were strictly looking at cleanup and trying to correct that date in particular. And I think I went over what was.
Yep. And this is not new. We have been cleaning up this language over the last couple of years, ever since the voters of Benton County endorsed ranked choice voting for the commissioners' races. We've made a series of changes, and most of them have been purely in order to use plain English, and in order to bring us into the modern age, as James mentioned, to do things like electronically submit a digital photograph, which was not possible when the code was first written. Okay. Commissioner Malone.
Yeah, I'm not sure James mentioned it this time, but on the two-page ballot, your explanation earlier this morning, I think clarified for me that there are real problems with two-page ballots in your, I guess, in the audit process, that there's a possibility for people only sending one page back of the two-page ballot, and that creates some real issues with the audit process, and I appreciated that clarification, because if you're just talking about it, well, one page, two page, what's the difference? But there is a real difference. So appreciate that information.
Sure. Thank you.
Council Crony, at this point, do we need to take a vote to extend this hearing to our next meeting date, or do we just, can I just state that?
This is the chair's prerogative. To continue this hearing, you'll need to continue it to a time, date, and place certain, which presumably would be 11 a.m. Tuesday, January 23rd, both virtual and at the board's meeting room at 4500 Southwest Research Way.
Okay. Okay, so at this time, I will continue this public hearing to January 23rd at 11 a.m., both virtual and in person at the Holmes Shipley meeting room. And we will have a full draft of the changes in the packet and continue at that time.
And I just to clarify, I believe this is the direction you're heading, Commissioner Ojero. You are not closing public testimony, which means the opportunity will be available next week for anyone to comment on the changes.
Correct. We are not closing public testimony at this time. Thank you.
I have a clarifying question when it comes to the information that we will see in the packet. I assume, so the email that I sent with edits will be in there, or are we just looking at having one document with all the changes?
My preference is one document with all the changes.
Okay. Could we maybe have both? Like, could we get the same version that was in this packet, and then also the new version with the edits that I submitted, just so that it's easy to see them side by side?
Your request is noted, and we'll make sure that.
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that everything is clearly labeled so people know what's what. There was another question.
When does the packet come out?
The packet, our goal is for the packets to come out the Wednesday before the meeting. So in this case, that is very soon. That is tomorrow. And I don't know, given our ice storm and staffing, whether that's feasible, but we will do our best to get it out by close of business tomorrow. So with that, we are close the public hearing, and we will now adjourn our meeting of the Board of Commissioners, and see you all tomorrow in our next virtual meeting.